How does a studio that was only known for linear first-person shooters manage to create a massively successful open-world game that is so different on its first try? With the highly anticipated sequel Horizon Forbidden West being released in February 2022, it's time to go through this incredible journey. This is the evolution of Horizon Zero Dawn. Horizon Zero Dawn is an action role-playing game developed by Guerrilla Games and released for the PlayStation 4 in 2017. The initial development of this game started in 2011, and it took Guerrilla 6 years of hard work to come up with this masterpiece. The story is set in the post-apocalyptic United States over 1,000 years after the collapse of human civilization. Players assume the role of a young hunter known as Aloy as she explores a vast and beautiful open world dominated by robotic creatures. On February 18, 2022, a highly anticipated sequel will be released. So without delay, let's go through the evolution of Horizon Zero Dawn. Before the production of Horizon Zero Dawn, Guerrilla was known for Killzone, a linear first-person shooter series. It was impressive what the company had created with a small budget, and Killzone became a successful franchise. However, following the release of Killzone 3, Guerrilla started considering the idea of developing a new game. To make things interesting, everyone at the company was invited to pitch their own ideas. The game would be set in a post-apocalyptic world with a female protagonist trying to understand what happened in the past. It was also going to feature an open world, which Guerrilla was not familiar with at the time. Although the concept was well-defined, Guerrilla was skeptical at first and gave it little attention. They started working on another project that they thought was safer and better. This unreleased game would share similar features with Killzone, which they were already familiar with. However, they just couldn't get Horizon out of their minds. In the final minutes, they pitched the idea to Sony to explore their new concept. In 2011, a small group of only 8 people started working on the concept of Horizon Zero Dawn. The rest of the studio was still focusing on Killzone: Shadow Fall. The goal of this concept phase was to design what Horizon was going to become by answering questions like, what was the combat against the machines going to be like? What open world was Horizon going to be? What kind of abilities will the player need? And of course, what kind of story was the game going to have? But another major goal was to make it playable as soon as possible. At the time, the studio only had the developer tools of Killzone, but no tools for creating an open world with a different style of combat, which made it all very challenging. Instead of creating something simple at the start, they immediately started working on the most complex and difficult machine they could think of, the Thunderjaw. The idea behind it was if they would manage to tackle the gameplay elements needed for the Thunderjaw, then they could later use these mechanics for smaller robots. The team basically made a Lego version of the Thunderjaw with many different parts. Surprisingly, many of these early concepts from 2011 actually made it in the final game. In this prototype, developers tested the mechanics of the Thunderjaw to know how it would feel, look, and how the machine would interact with the player. In total, it took the team roughly 2 years to develop the Thunderjaw. Besides the machines and gameplay, Guerrilla also started working on the open world. Instead of the dark dystopian worlds they had created in the Killzone games, they wanted to create a beautiful and colorful world where people wanted to spend time in. The team watched a lot of BBC documentaries to get inspiration from nature. Yet again, the team decided to tackle the most difficult part first, which was to build a huge city known as Mesa City. This would be the center of the story. While it still exists in the game, it doesn't play a central role anymore. It is much smaller now and has a new name. It is now called Meridian. At the time, Aloy would ride a normal horse, which eventually was changed as it felt weird to have a normal horse in a world full of machines. Mount riding was also an important part of the game, since the player needed to be able to travel through the dense forest without having to crash against trees. This resulted in mechanics where the horse on which you were riding constantly adjusts its course. Fun fact, Horizon was first going to be a game where players could play together with co-op. However, by doing this, they had to sacrifice detail, and the team was not willing to do that. The final part of the concept phase was to create a proof of concept. Now that the team had built many prototypes, it was time to merge them together. At this stage, the open world was beginning to look more realistic with vegetation and different machines. It also allowed the player to interact with the environment, hunt machines, and even gather parts to upgrade their armors. Many of the core questions had been answered in the concept stage, but also new questions were raised, like what was the size and density of the open world going to be? What variety of player abilities would there be? But one of the key questions that had yet to be answered was, what was the story going to be? The concept phase lasted for 2.5 years before Guerrilla continued to the next phase. Fun fact, the world map was originally almost 5 times bigger than its current size. The reason for the reduction in size was that it made the world denser and more interesting. After the release of Killzone Shadowfall in late 2013, Guerrilla's remaining staff began working on Horizon Zero Dawn. This increased the number of people working on the game from about 10 to 180 people. It marked the beginning of the pre-production phase. The studio started focusing on quests, activities, characters, adding areas to the world, and defining the story. While the team had already been working on the story in the concept phase, it still wasn't a well-defined story. Approximately 20 different stories were written for the game, all exploring various concepts. The developers basically had zero experience in storytelling since it was outsourced to other companies for Killzone. Yet they managed to create an amazing story-driven game that countless people around the world came to love. The story also helped in defining Aloy, the main protagonist. While Aloy was already there from the start, she lacked details. During this phase, Aloy was given a character and personality.
Sun's design etched at length across the course of events.
Do you really not hear how ridiculous that sounds?
At the time, Aloy's horse was also replaced by a machine named the Strider. The team also created new machines. Initially, all the machines were meant to be dangerous, but in this phase, each machine received a unique behavior, look, and feel. In total, the game has 26 types of machines. At the end of the pre-production phase, they had built most of the core mechanics, the world, and the narrative. Fun fact, the tall necks were originally huntable. This idea was scrapped because some of the team thought this was not in line with Aloy's character since the tall necks were not aggressive. Now that all core questions have been answered, the next phase was the production phase. Here, Guerrilla's goal was to finalize the core mechanics and make the entire game playable. Although they thought they had everything sorted out at this stage, they still continued to encounter problems. For instance, there was too much human combat, while the focus of the game was meant to be on combat with machines. The reason for this was that robots cannot speak, and to make the story compelling, more human characters had to be added, which meant that fighting humans went from a secondary activity to a primary one. During the last phase, they started playtesting to allow gamers to give feedback. One of the problems they soon encountered was there were too many resources, which made it too complex. These problems were fixed to make the game more enjoyable. According to Guerrilla, some of the reviews were brutal, and improving on them made Horizon Zero Dawn become the successful game it is today. Horizon Zero Dawn was officially announced during Sony's E3 2015 press conference, and 2 years later in 2017, the game was released for the PlayStation 4. In Horizon Zero Dawn, players can explore the beautiful open world with different environments, including deserts, snowy mountains, and forests. They can also complete major quests as well as side quests. Aloy can kill enemies in a variety of ways, such as using a spear, shooting arrows, or using explosives. Each machine is unique and built for different purposes. In November 2017, an expansion was released called The Frozen Wilds. It adds a new story, characters, machines, and an entirely new area. In August 2021, an update was released for Horizon Zero Dawn for the next generation PlayStation 5. It boosts the performance to 4K at 60 frames per second, making the game even more stunning than before. Horizon Zero Dawn was praised by critics for its open world, visuals, combat, story, and the voice acting of Aloy. However, the dialogue, melee combat, and character models received some criticism. The game became a massive success and won many awards. For Guerrilla, it was easily their most successful title ever, far exceeding the sales of the Killzone games. In total, over 10 million copies were sold by February 2019, making it one of the best-selling PlayStation 4 games. On February 18, 2022, a sequel to Horizon Zero Dawn will be released, Horizon Forbidden West, for the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5. Horizon Forbidden West continues the story of Aloy to the arcane frontier known as the Forbidden West. The events of the game take place in post-apocalyptic California, Utah, and Nevada. It includes recognizable locations including a ruined San Francisco. According to Guerrilla, the game adds even bigger and more awe-inspiring machines. The world will also be larger than in the previous game, adds underwater exploration, and will feature improved traveling options, revamped climbing mechanics, and enhanced melee combat. The graphics certainly look stunning, with densely packed environments, and I can't wait to explore them. Are you also excited for Horizon Forbidden West? Let us know in the comments.